What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you with another Atlanta Falcons video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. In today's video, I want to recap yesterday's victory against the Denver Broncos. But if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll know when I've done Atlanta Falcons content. Hit that like button for your boy. I do appreciate you guys continuing to support the channel. We are on the road to 1K, which is currently the goal. But I do appreciate every single one of you guys continuing to like, share, subscribe, continuing to comment back and forth with me on the channel and under my videos. I appreciate that as well. But with that being said, let's jump right into the video. So as I was stating, I do want to recap yesterday's victory against the Denver Broncos. I also want to talk about some of the pros and cons from yesterday's game. And for the first half of this season, we are going into our bye week. We now do sit at 3-6. Heading into the bye week, we are on a 2-game winning streak, which is a great thing that we have gained some momentum. Since Dan Quinn's firing, our interim head coach, Raheem Morris, he's currently 3-1, so he has, looks like he has turned the ship around, and we are heading in the right direction, which is a positive thing. So with that being said, let's first talk about some of the negatives, and then we'll talk about some of the positives from the first 8 games or first 9 games of this season. The first thing that I want to touch on as far as the negative side, the number one thing that I've noticed the first half of this season and yesterday's game against the Denver Broncos, we really have struggled to rush the passer. Coming into the season, I did think that the pass rush would be much improved due to us adding depth on this team. We did bring in Charles Harris in free agency. We did bring in Dante Fowler Jr. on a big contract. We had John Kaminsky returning and continuing to develop. Grady Jarrett, Tat McKinley. I did think that these guys were going to have a better season rushing the passer than we had last season. But we still have struggled, just like last season. We have struggled this season to stay healthy, and we have struggled to rush the passer. I do credit the injuries to some of the reason why we haven't been able to rush the passer consistently. Yesterday, Dante Fowler Jr. wasn't able to play with a hamstring injury. Tat McKinley has been out most of the season with that groin injury. The only player that's really been healthy consistently is Grady Jarrett. That's normally in the starting rotation. We've had to rely on players like Steven Means and Jacob Tatui Mariner, who normally would be like the second and third string guys as far as playing the defensive end and rushing the passer. But we've kind of had to rely on those guys because those guys have been the ones that have been consistently healthy. Charles Harris has made a couple plays in the first half of the season, but mainly Grady Jarrett has been the best player as usual on the defensive line. He's been the most consistent player. Like I said, Dante Fowler Jr., he's another guy that has given us some splash plays, but he came into the season battling an ankle injury. He has made a ton of plays on the goal line in the run game, and he's done a pretty good job as well as rushing the passer. He has 2 sacks on the season, Dante Fowler Jr. Grady Jarrett has 2.5 sacks going into yesterday's game. I believe he had 1 sack yesterday, but I believe he currently leads the team in sacks. And then the linebackers have really played well for us. Foye Oluokun, Deion Jones, and Michael Walker. Those guys are playing lights out at the linebacker position, and those guys has really got after the passer in the last couple games since Raheem Morris have taken over, and him and Jeff Ulbrich have used this new blitz scheme and these new blitz packages to try to bring pressure, being that we haven't been able to get pressure consistently with our front four. So to me, that's been the biggest, weakest link, the biggest weak link with this Falcons team so far. This season, in the first half of the season, we must improve in the second half of this season because we do play some really good offenses and some really good quarterbacks. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers twice in the second half. We have the New Orleans Saints right after the bye. We have the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. We do have to play the Las Vegas Raiders the second half, the LA Chargers in the second half, and we have to play the Kansas City Chiefs, which could be a really tough game because we know Pat Mahomes and that offense is really special. So we're definitely going to have to try to do better in the second half as far as rushing the passer with that front four. Good news is that we're going into the bye week where guys can actually get healthy. I do expect Dante Fowler Jr. to be back to face the Saints in a couple weeks within this 2-week period on the bye. When we come back to face New Orleans, I do think that Dante Fowler will be back healthy. Good news is we did get Marlon Davidson and John Kaminsky back from the COVID list, that COVID-19 list. And both of those guys should also add some punch for our defensive line and help us in the pass rushing category. So those guys should definitely come back and also add some juice and add some depth up front to keep those guys fresh, where we can kind of rotate those guys in and out. So that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to in the second half of this season. Another negative in this first half of the season was the coaching. Dan Quinn started off 0-5 before he was fired. I think it was the right move to get rid of Dan Quinn, because we've seen since Dan Quinn has been let go, Raheem Morris have really changed the culture. And the players are playing with a lot more confidence. Guys are playing more aggressive. I think Raheem Morris is doing a good job of kind of putting makeup or kind of covering guys' blemishes. If I can say that, he's done a good job of trying to cover up some of the weaknesses of our players, like Isaiah Oliver. He's done a good job of moving Isaiah Oliver around, not just keeping him out there on the island by himself with no safety help. I really think that was something that bit the Falcons early on in the season, that Dan Quinn was really stubborn. He didn't make really any adjustments from game to game. He allowed certain players to continue to get picked on. And at that point, those deficiencies, teams took advantage of Isaiah Oliver and some of the players that we had that were inexperienced, or they were able to go after those players' weaknesses. So I think Raheem Morris has done a good job since he's taken over to cover some of these players' deficiencies. But I do think in the first half of the season, the coaching was definitely one of the negatives. You definitely can't afford to start the season 0-5. We're not out of the playoff race mathematically, but it's going to be really hard for us to dig out of this hole, especially if the teams that are currently ahead of us continue to win games. We do control our own destiny, as far as we do face the Bucs twice and the Saints twice. So we possibly could sweep those guys. If we sweep those guys, then we can possibly get back in the thick of things. But we have a really small margin of error right now. We can't afford no more than maybe 1 or 2 losses in the next couple games. We must at least go, I'll say, 10-6 or 9-7. So if we have to go 10-6, that means we will have to win every other game we play. As far as 9-7, that'll give us a little bit of wiggle room, to lose like one more game. But we're really going to have to take it one game at a time. I do think that this Falcons team has what it takes to run the table. As long as you have Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and that explosive offense. They showed yesterday against the Denver Broncos that we're a very explosive offense. We can put up 30 points on any defense in this league, and it is a passing league. And we are the best team right now in the league when it comes to explosive plays and when it comes to passing. Matt Ryan right now leads the league in passing yards. Todd Gurley is top 5 in rushing, not only in rushing yards, but also rushing touchdowns. He has about 9 touchdowns rushing so far this year, Todd Gurley. So he was a great addition to our Atlanta Falcons. In the second half of the season, I do think that we must use Brian Hill more. I would give those, split up those carries maybe 50-50 between Todd Gurley and Brian Hill. We need to keep Todd Gurley fresh, especially if we happen to make the playoffs. Anything is possible. We want Todd Gurley to be fresh if we end up making the playoffs and making a push. So we need to take advantage of Brian Hill. Brian Hill has been one of the bright spots for this Atlanta Falcons team in the first half of the season. Another positive is the wide receivers, not just Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, but the backup wide receivers, the 3rd and 4th and 5th string wide receivers. Russell Gage has emerged as one of the best slot receivers in the game. Definitely for our Atlanta Falcons. He can play inside and outside. He showed yesterday against Denver with Calvin Ridley being out of the game. They had Russell Gage playing on the outside. Olamide Zaccheaus had a big game yesterday, over 100 yards receiving, and he's only in his second year out of the University of Virginia. He really showed that speed yesterday with a nice 60-yard touchdown catch from Matt Ryan. He also had another play for about 40 yards where he broke off his route and ran down the field, and Matt Ryan was on the run and made a nice throw on the run. So Olamide Zaccheaus is one of those guys who also is emerging as one of those guys who could definitely be a threat for the Atlanta Falcons, another weapon in Matt Ryan's toolbox. Hayden Hurst continues to improve and continues to show why he's a much explosive player. He's one of the best explosive tight ends in the game. A lot better than Austin Hooper, a lot more explosive than Austin Hooper. He showed yesterday with a nice catch up the seam that he's one of those guys in the second half of the season where we can exploit mismatches, especially with him lining up against linebackers, lining up against safeties. He runs like a wide receiver, and he's very physical. He's one of those guys that can run out the catch. So he's another guy in the second half of the season that I think the Falcons need to get involved more. Dirk Cutter needs to do a better job at mixing up these run plays. He needs to stop running all of these zone runs up the gut, all these draw plays up the gut. He needs to start using those stretch runs with Todd Gurley, using those stretch runs with Brian Hill, and those toss plays where those guys can get out on the edge and they can use their explosiveness. Like I was saying yesterday on our after show, on our post game show, guys don't want to tackle Brian Hill and Todd Gurley. These guys are really big and explosive, and those corners and safeties don't want to tackle those big guys in space one-on-one. So we definitely need to do a better job in the second half of the season of getting those guys involved, not just in the run game, but also in the pass game. Both Todd Gurley and Brian Hill are very good at catching the ball out of the backfield. So in the second half of the season, I want to see those guys used more in the passing game, on screen passes, on quick swing passes out of the backfield. That can be an extension of the running game. And I definitely think that we need to mix it up and do a better job at getting those guys in the running game involved early and often in the second half of the season. In the first half of the season as well, the offensive line has played really well compared to last season. Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry in their second year, both of those guys are playing very well. In their second year, both of those guys are playing really physical, not giving up a ton of pressures on Matt Ryan. Caleb McGarry has really come along at that right tackle position, and Chris Lindstrom at that guard position is one of the best guards, or developing as one of the best guards in the league. So those guys have played really well. It looks like James Carpenter at that other guard spot has found his footing, and that line is playing very good. They have played very solid this first half of the season. They play a little bit better in the run game with creating holes. They haven't been great in the run blocking, but they've been really, really good at pass protection. Like I said, Matt Ryan has been sacked a lot less than he was last season at this point, at the midway point. So I do give hats off to them. I do think that the offensive line has been a positive so far in the first half of the season. And with that being said, another thing I think that could be better heading into the second half of the season is clock management. Early in this season, I think that the coaches didn't do a good job of managing the clock. Even with Raheem Morris taking over, he did a bad job in that game against Detroit of not just running out the clock and kicking the game-winning field goal, handing the ball to Todd Gurley, where he accidentally scored a touchdown, which we can't put that on him. I put that more on Raheem Morris and those guys. They got to be smarter. And in the second half of the season, I want to see those guys improve. I do think that Raheem Morris, believe it or not, does have a chance at possibly being the next head coach, at least for next season or maybe even 2 seasons. If he goes, consistently gets this Falcons team somehow to the playoffs, or this team wins, say, the next 7 out of 8 games or something like that, and this team ends up going like 9-7 or something like that, Raheem Morris could really have a chance at being the next head coach. Rich McKay does have a great relationship with Raheem Morris. He was in Tampa Bay with Raheem Morris. He did hire Raheem Morris in Tampa Bay. So I do think that Raheem Morris does have a chance. I know a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans are not going to want to hear this, but I do think that Raheem Morris does have a chance at possibly being the next head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. If he somehow can continue this win streak and continue to get these guys up and motivated for these games, and somehow they run the table, Raheem could possibly be the next head coach, at least on a short prove it deal, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. I could definitely see them keeping him around. Now, I don't know about these guys on the coaching staff. As far as Dirk Cutter, if he'll still be the offensive coordinator, I do think that Jeff Ulbrich, if Raheem Morris is retained, I do think that he would retain Jeff Ulbrich as the defensive coordinator. But I don't know about the other guys, like the special teams coaches and Tosh Lapoy being the defensive line coach. I do think that Joe Witt would be another guy as a defensive backs coach that Raheem Morris possibly would keep on his coaching staff. But I don't know about Tosh Lapoy. I think that was a Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff hire. But I do think that Raheem Morris and Joe Witt have a good relationship, and him and Jeff Ulbrich have a great relationship. So I do see those guys possibly being a part of the coaching staff if Raheem Morris is retained. Personally, I'm a wait and see type of guy. I do think if Raheem Morris can get these guys, continue this win streak, and somehow these guys make the playoffs, or somehow these guys run the table, I do think that Raheem Morris would deserve at that point in time a chance to be the head coach for maybe next season, or at least on a 2 year deal, prove it deal, with limited money guaranteed. But I definitely think that he could possibly lead this team. I do feel like everybody needs a fair shake. And right now, he's doing a pretty good job of coaching this team. 3-1 is a pretty good record for a head coach. I don't really care about how we're winning these games. Like, I know a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans are mad about the game yesterday and how we're letting up on a lot of these leads where we jump out to a big lead and we're allowing these teams to come back. But like I've been saying, if you looked at the games that were played yesterday in the league, the Pittsburgh Steelers being undefeated facing the 2-5 Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys was in that game and they almost won the game. They had the ball at the end driving and could possibly have scored a touchdown to win the game, but only being down 5. So that just goes to show you that from week to week, any team can beat any team. So I don't take yesterday's game of the Falcons barely beating the Denver Broncos, with the Denver Broncos making that late surge. I don't put a lot of weight on that. I put weight on wins and losses. That's what I look at, the W's and the L's, because it's been so many games early in this season where the Falcons should have won and they lost at the last second. So that just goes to show you that that's coaching, and that also comes down to those 5 or 6 plays I always talk about, that the game comes down to 5 or 6 crucial plays in a game where the momentum can swing left or right, and where wins and losses are, take place in those swing plays. So to me, the Falcons have done a better job in these last couple games that Raheem Morris have taken over. They've done a good job when plays are there to be made. The guys are making those plays. Yesterday's game against the Denver Broncos, one of the swing plays in the game was late in that game with Ricardo Allen catching that interception and running it down to like the 10-yard line. That was a crucial play in that game, and those were the type of plays that the Falcons were not making early in the year. If you remember against the Chicago Bears early in the season, I think it was Nick Foles rolling to his right, threw the ball in traffic, and Isaiah Oliver dropped the interception. And there's been numerous plays like that early in the season where the Falcons had chances to win the game, chances to make plays. Also, that game against Dallas where Russell Gage was in the Wildcat and he threw the ball down the field to Julio Jones, who had a step on Trevon Diggs of the Dallas Cowboys, and Julio dropped the touchdown pass. Like, those are the type of plays and games that you can't afford to miss. And if you miss those plays, those are plays that cost you the game. And to be honest, it was numerous plays, in Dallas. Us not recovering that onside kick was another huge play in that game where that game was in the balance and could have went either way. So I do think that that Raheem Morris deserves a lot of credit for the way that these guys are playing, and the whole coaching staff Jeff Ulbrich, and everybody that's on this coaching staff. Tosh Lapoy, Joe Witt has that secondary playing a lot better. So I do think that this coaching staff, since Raheem Morris, is coaching a lot better. And I do think that we have to give these guys credit. I don't think that we can just brush over the fact that Raheem Morris is 3-1 so far coaching the team. I don't think that that's a fluke. To be honest, most of the games that we played, we've dominated most of the teams that we played in these last 4 games. In the last quarter, we've dominated pretty much every game. Yesterday against Denver, we pretty much dominated Denver the whole game. Yeah, they did have that late surge where they were able to come back, but our Falcons, for the most part, the whole game, we had the momentum and we pretty much put the nail in their coffin. But with that being said, you guys let me know what you think about the first half of the season. Let me know what you think about the video. How do you think that the second half is going to shake out? I think that this Falcons team can beat anybody on this schedule. I do think that this team could possibly run the table. And if this team does run the table, I definitely think that Raheem Morris and this coaching staff, I think that they deserve maybe a short-term deal to be the head coach of the head coach of this team for next year. I do think that Raheem Morris at that point would deserve a shot. But you guys let me know what you think about the video. Like I said, please hit that subscribe button. We're on the go to 1K. I do appreciate every single one of you guys for continuing to tune in, continuing to like, share, subscribe, leave your comments below. But this been your boy Jew signing off. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. And as always, Falcons Nation, rise up. Peace.